Welcome to my channel. So, I want to talk about the confusion in abusive relationships. And do not for 1 second think that the confusion is anything but on purpose. Okay. This confusion is not an accident. It's not that they're just hot and cold and you can't make sense of it. You can't make sense of it because you're not meant to make sense of it. It is meant to be confusing. All of that anxiety and the second guessing kind of swirling around inside you, it's not a flaw, it's literally by design. So the confusion that you feel, and especially that sort of, maybe I'm the problem, maybe I'm too sensitive, it's not brokenness. It's actually not who you are at all. This is by design. It's manufactured, it is built. And more importantly, it's intentional because it is incredibly effective. The confusion is serving a purpose for them because when you're confused, you tend to be kind of paralyzed, right? You're trying to figure out, why am I so confused? And that makes sense. Our brains want to sort of reconcile this confusion. And so this is even in the subject of cognitive dissonance, why we sort of feel like maybe it's abuse, maybe he loves me, maybe it's trauma. This is easier to believe. It's easier to believe that it's not on purpose, that this person isn't just willfully choosing to hurt you. I think that most people can't even kind of fathom that somebody out there exists like that, that somebody would hurt you for no reason, right? What have you done to deserve this? Nothing. Some people will hurt you because they can. But I fundamentally really know how hard this is to hear. I really do. I've been there. And women tell me every single day, I feel like I'm losing my mind. And I felt like I was losing my mind. So maybe that's what you're asking yourself. Or why do you keep going back? Why do you keep thinking about him? Why do you still feel hooked, even though you know what this person has done to you? Maybe you're wondering if it was really that bad, right? Why you're defending someone to your friends, to your family. Why do you still want to believe that there are good parts and wonder if those good parts were actually real, you know? But this is kind of right exactly where I want to meet you in this framework, in this question, because the answer is not that you're crazy or there's something wrong with you or, you have low self-worth and that's it, you're weak. It's this was done to you. And I want to explain how and why this was done to you. So if you don't already know me, my name is Lisa Sunny, and I'm a trauma bond recovery coach. I'm trauma informed. I'm an author. I've written 4 books. I'm a speaker, and I have been able to share this message with over 1 million people across all of my social media platforms. And the books that I've written, which you can actually see right behind me, I have written the Trauma Bond Recovery Journal, which is the most popular one. It's a 12-week journal prompt or a guide to really help you how to think when you're trying to break free of a trauma bond. And I've spoken on stages and contributed to expert panels and collaborated with some of the leading voices in the field of abuse recovery and narcissistic abuse education in general. But also, I'm a survivor myself. I feel like a lot of people, if you start becoming passionate about this particular topic, you've probably been through it. I know that a lot of us feel like we get our little narcissistic abuse PhD as you navigate learning all about what happened. But I also really questioned myself and my work, my writing, my coaching. It's all built on this commitment to, I hated what happened to me. And I want people to understand what's happening to them so that they can get themselves out, because I firmly believe that clarity is power, knowledge is power, and confusion is how they keep that from you. And that's the point, right? They don't want you to be clear. So I do. So let's get into that, right? So how confusion is manufactured is actually really interesting, right? It's not a mistake in an abusive relationship. Confusion is the point. That's the thing that I want to really drive home today. The confusion is the point. So they don't need to be strategic masterminds to pull this off. I hear so many people say, but my person's not smart enough. It has nothing to do with smarts. They don't need a checklist. It is instinctive. They know that instability breeds dependence. They might not even know that consciously, but they know that. And they do that through patterns, right? Through gaslighting and blame shifting and hot and cold behavior, through weaponized apologies, through withholding affection, which is not code for spicy time. I mean, actual affection. And they're going to create this feeling of that you love them, you hate them. They're the pain and the comfort, the knife and the band-aid. They become your everything. And the ways that they can sort of blame shift and create doubt, it can be very subtle or very indirect or both, but the messaging is sort of consistent, that the problem is you, the problem is not them, that you don't understand, that they don't understand. All of this is just to create confusion. So gaslighting is one of the best tactics for this, right? And I mean, it's a bit of a Dr. Ramani quote, but gaslighting is not lying and it's not remembering things differently. It is meant to make you doubt yourself, to make you think that you are crazy for ever thinking what you think, right? That never happened is meant to make you doubt your memory. You're crazy is meant to make you question your stability, right? Your mental stability. You're too sensitive. You're not supposed to trust your feelings. You're the abusive one. That shifts everything and it turns your reality, frankly, upside down, but it also makes you defend yourself. So it works really, really well. But fundamentally, it's about planting that seed of doubt. Like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's me. Maybe I overreacted. That's meant to make that confusion happen. And so once that little seed is planted, it's going to grow into self-doubt, complete self-doubt. You don't trust yourself at all, into you apologizing for yourself when they're the ones being abusive, to walking on eggshells and constantly feeling like you have to manage their moods, to being in a situation where you are constantly over explaining or you're defending yourself. You know, I talk a little bit about my, sorry, not my, but I talk a little bit about the Jade method. Don't justify, don't argue, don't defend, don't explain. How to use the Jade method is challenging because it requires emotional regulation. It requires some level of an ability to self-validate because you don't feel the need to justify, argue, defend, or explain. But even if you're not quite ready to do that, just sort of pull that back a little bit. And when it's, you know, you're crazy, don't say, no, I'm not. Just, you know, don't say, sure, I am, but just, you know what I mean? That's an example of that. When they try to bait you into an argument, I'm not going to participate in this argument. There are things you can say that sort of walk you back a little bit, but it is very hard because when you pull back, they latch on even more. So I realize that as you pull away, it ramps up, which makes it harder. But compliance is the goal there, right? That's the point. It's so hard so that you give up. It's a double-edged sword, or it's a catch-22, I guess is a better phrase. So one of the things that is, you know, really the biggest character, in my opinion, of an abusive relationship is that it doesn't always just have abuse. There is always kindness as part of an abusive relationship. And that's one of the best weapons that an abuser has against you. And it's a tactic called intermittent reinforcement. And this is when kindness is delivered intermittently, which means you can never expect it. You know, I sort of joke, not that it's funny, if you knew that every Friday that this person was going to be awful to you or good to you, you could bank on it, you could count it. Your nervous system wouldn't be so tense if you could count on it. Even if it was once a month, once a week, every other day, if there was some kind of schedule. But when it's an intermittent schedule, you never know. And so your body is in fight or flight mode and you're constantly waiting. That's the eggshells. That's the tense feeling. That's the anxiety. And that's the confusion because you can't figure it out. What pissed him off last week doesn't piss him off this week. It's so confusing. How can you know? That's the point. So that you're on your toes and on guard all the time. Because when your nervous system is tense like this, you're not thinking clearly. You're not receiving information clearly. It's really hard to become clear. And that's the point, right? They want the cycle of hot and cold. And then they're going to suddenly switch cruelty, kindness, abuse, sweet. And you never know. They'll berate you, ignore you, insult you. And then out of nowhere, they're sweet again. Something that my abuser used to do was he would get me into these really deep arguments that are just circular, no win. I would be so worked up, like beside myself. And then he'd be like, can we just watch TV? Can we just have dinner now? Like you picked this argument, and it's to get me, and then just, okay, we're done. It's meant to make you go, were we not just in an argument? Does this make it to confuse you? And so we would cuddle, or he would take me to dinner or do something nice. And he said the right things. That's the point, right? They touch you tenderly. they apologize, they ignore it, they minimize it, whatever. But this is the intermittent reinforcement. It's actually the same psychology that keeps people pulling slot machines in casinos. You hear this kind of compared a lot to gambling because it's the reward. So you keep putting it in the slot machine and pull the lever, even though only sometimes you get the reward and you never know when. But why do people keep doing it? What is so addictive about gambling? What is so addictive about, frankly, gambling our lives in relationships like these, right? You never know when the reward is coming, but when it does, it hooks you deeper. It always hooks you deeper. And it teaches you to chase after that good version of them, and you blame yourself when it disappears. Maybe they blame you, maybe you blame you, maybe both. It shifts. They condition you to blame yourself, in all honesty. But what I commonly see is if I can just be better, kinder, quieter, prettier, thinner, more this, less that, maybe he'll stay this way. But if who he is contingent upon how you show up, is this person even real? Right? You're in control. I used to be so sarcastic with mine and be like, oh, so I'm all powerful. I can make you do anything. Because we all know that's absolutely not true, right? You're in no form of control in these relationships. But it's like, if you would just be more or less something, then I wouldn't. As if you have full control over how they show up in the world, how they act, how they behave. You can control their moods. It's a ridiculous notion. And it's also not true, because I'm telling you, and you know this, no matter how you show up, it's never enough, right? If they tell you to jump 3 feet and you jump 3 feet, they'll probably tell you they never said that. They'll probably tell you they said 5 feet. When you jump 5, why are you even jumping, right? It's just to create confusion and chaos, because they thrive in this. This is a game. And frankly, the game is rigged. It's not about you at all. It is about keeping you hooked in the cycle. This method works. And again, I remind you, this has nothing to do with intelligence. This is instinctual. They learn this over time. So I want to really kind of attack this myth of he doesn't know better, because what I see constantly is this, he doesn't know, he doesn't understand. If I could just get him to understand. What if he does? What if he absolutely knows exactly what he's doing and he's understood this entire time? And I can give you some evidence of how I can prove that they know, because if you did to them what they're doing to you, how would that go over? They know the behavior is bad. They just think that they're entitled to deliver that behavior, and they don't deserve to receive it. You deserve it. They don't deserve it. That's the difference. They are grandiose, entitled, and they lack accountability. Who'd have thunk, right? Complete shocker. But this he doesn't know better is truly one of the most dangerous myths that we kind of internalize when we believe that they don't know what they're doing. And when we're being really clear, they know when they're being cruel. They know when they're lying. They know when they're lying. I could scream that right now. They know when they're twisting reality. And they don't need to be, deeply self-aware to know that they're treating someone badly and that cruelty gets them power. It's why they're doing it. They absolutely know. It is not some accidental side effect that you're confused. It is a tool of control, and it is a hallmark of abusive relationships. I mean, people talk about cognitive dissonance, right? The concept of holding two conflicting beliefs. He is good, he is bad, he is the pain, he's the comfort, right? You're holding these two beliefs at the same time, and that creates mental discomfort. That's called cognitive dissonance. That's what it is. Your brain is like, if it's abuse, I need to leave. If it's abuse, I'm stupid for staying. If it's abuse, no. So your brain goes, oh, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe it was a bad day. Maybe, and our brains just sort of naturally choose the answer that's less painful, less harder to hold. So we're not really making a conscious decision here. It's something that's subconsciously happening. And we need to sort of bring that up and go, no, but wait, how can a person be good and bad? How can they abuse me, but love me? And when your mind says, oh, but maybe it's not abuse, how can this person do these things and treat me this way and love me? Can this coexist? Really? By the definition you want to believe in love, the definition that is healthy, and we'll talk more about what that actually looks like, what healthy real love is. But how can that be? How do you reconcile that belief? by telling yourself something. Is that the truth? Is what you're telling yourself actually true? Is this love? Keep asking yourself that. It is really true that these things just can't coexist. But the truth is, our brains, they want harmony, they don't want chaos. And so it works overtime to minimize the painful truth. And you tell yourself, he didn't mean it. You tell yourself, maybe it was my fault, or that you're expecting too much, because they're so good at convincing you that you're asking for too much. You're not. You're not. But none of this actually makes the harm disappear. It actually just makes you blame yourself for it, which is worse. And then you've got something called betrayal blindness. And I've talked about this in other videos that I really encourage you to check out. But it's when your mind kind of shields you from fully seeing the betrayal, because it would frankly destroy your reality. But don't confuse this with denial. It is so much deeper than denial. But when you're invested and you have your heart and your dreams and your life and your money and your all these things into a person, you really need to believe the best about them. And I get it. Seeing the truth means that you need to face this really devastating loss, which isn't really just the loss of a relationship, but the loss of the future that you were counting on, that you've dreamed about. And that's really human. It's not weakness. You weren't foolish. You were faithful. You were loyal. You weren't blind, right? You were betrayed. And that makes sense. So if we want to kind of get into what is real love, because as much as I would love to think that everybody knows what real love feels like, right? I think there's a lot of people that absolutely have no idea what real love feels like. Maybe you've never experienced it. Maybe the love that you grew up feeling felt normal to you. Maybe it is a mirror of the relationship that you're in. But can you imagine that real love validates your feelings? It encourages open, honest conversations, that it acknowledges mistakes without shifting all the blame onto you. It offers safety, predictability in a good way. Not that you can't ever be spontaneous, right? But it's predictable in that it's safe, and it has respect even when things get hard. Can you imagine having a disagreement with someone and not getting screamed at? It's just, we see things differently, and it doesn't have to be some massive battle. But abuse, it's going to invalidate your feelings, and you'll see punishments. You get punished for having feelings. You get punished for being hurt by them. I can't believe this. I can't believe you don't trust me just because I cheated on you. And then they stonewall you for a week. And what you've learned is to silence yourself when they hurt you. They twist arguments to make everything your fault. They create that chaos and instability and fear, because those are tools of control. This whole idea, right, that they're not in control of themselves. Abuse is wildly controlled. Fear and intimidation, these are tactics of control. Real love builds bridges, it's a beautiful thing. It brings clarity. And when you're in an abusive relationship, you feel like you're in a friggin' cage, and you're absolutely confused. You're not confused if it's real love. You're not confused if the person is even a little bit toxic or a little bit traumatized and needs to work on things, right? People aren't perfect. I get that. But there's a massive difference between abusiveness and toxicity. Toxicity, fundamentally, those people are willing to change. Abusers are not. Abusers will find every possible way to make it your fault and say that they're not going to change. So they manufacture confusion to keep you in the relationship, to keep you hooked. And it's not an emotional state, or I should say, it's not just an emotional state. It is a control mechanism designed to paralyze you on purpose. I cannot say that enough. You stay busy trying to figure out what went wrong instead of asking, why am I even here? We're always, but why did he this? But why did they that? I don't understand why they did this if they said that. What if you let all of that go and you said, what am I doing here? Why am I in this? What is happening here? What feels familiar to me? What am I really getting out of this relationship? And it's interesting. Some people will say they're getting nothing, but I think that some people will say companionship, a person, someone to talk to, love sometimes, like, let's raise the bar. And it's so easy to say, I realize, but this is why I teach women what's really going on. And in my courses and in my coaching, I teach people how to break free, because that's the key. How do you get out of this? So you stay so wrapped up in all of this self-doubt that leaving feels scarier than staying. That's what gives them more compliance, more submission, in all honesty. It siphons your energy. Your energy is a resource that you should protect. It siphons your dreams, your self-esteem. It literally tricks you into living in this cage that I'm talking about. So clarity is the key. Clarity is the first step, right? You're not crazy, you're not broken, and you're not the problem. You're not perfect. I understand, but you've been caught in this, and it is this web that's been kind of intentionally created to keep you stuck, to trap you. So the person that made you feel this way, they're not confused. They're not accidentally cruel. And I know, there's this sort of like accidentally cruel. My abuser used to do this where it's like, but this isn't abuse. This isn't mean. I'm not being mean. You're crazy to even think this is mean. That's gaslighting. And if they're making a pattern of that, and that's something they're doing frequently, it's abuse. They don't have to agree with your feelings. This isn't a democracy. It's not like I feel gaslighted and he doesn't think you are being gaslighted, therefore we vote. It's not how it works, but they present it that way, right? You're wrong. You're wrong to feel how you feel. But that's the point. That's gaslighting. So the clarity that you might feel even in watching this video, that little spark of like, oh my God, this makes sense. That's the beginning of your freedom. So I want you to ride this, because clarity alone isn't enough. Knowing what's happening is kind of the first crack, but breaking the trauma bond, learning emotional regulation, building trust in yourself, that's the real work. And that's the work that we do in the trauma bond recovery course or in working with me one-on-one. So honestly, if this video helped you feel seen, if it gave you words for what's kind of going on inside your mind, then I invite you to follow me, subscribe to this. I put out a lot of videos like this to give education, because I really want to show people that they deserve a life beyond abuse. You were targeted. This is something that someone has done to you. You don't deserve this. You deserve to feel clear. The best sign that you're in an abusive relationship is just that you're confused. Even if you don't have the skills and the steps to get yourself clear, the sheer fact that you're confused is absolutely enough to know that this is abuse. So thank you so much for being here today. And as I said, subscribe to my channel and don't miss my videos like this. Thanks.